Hey, do you want to learn how I made this effect? Come here. No, come here. Let's go.
Okay, so we're going to start off by creating our initial piece of paper by bringing in a plane object. Now, by default, the plane object is set way too large. So we're going to bring that down to 20 centimeters by 30 centimeters, which is your average A4 size piece of paper. And we're going to give it 15 segments on both the width and the height. Now we want to duplicate it, so we're going to put that plane inside of a cloner. We're going to set that cloner to be on the linear axis and only half a centimeter between each piece. And then I'm going to duplicate that about 50 times. Great, we've got our initial stack of paper set up. So from here, what we want to do is create a collider to catch the paper underneath. I'm just going to bring that down in scale. I might give that more segments. Great, that's all set up. Now what we want to do is add our simulation tags to these two different objects. So on the plane, I'm going to add a simulation collider tag. I'm going to set the bounce to 0 and I'm going to set the friction to 10 just because we don't want the paper sliding around when it's initially being set up. Now on our cloner tag, this is important. We don't want to put the cloth tag on the plane. We want to put it on the cloner. So we're going to go cloner, simulation tags, cloth. Cool. Now I'm just going to set up the surface of this. I'm going to give it a bendiness of about 33, friction of 0.25, and I'm going to give it a thickness of 0.1 centimeters. Okay. Now, what happens if we press play? Great, they're falling through. It's probably because there's not enough substeps or passes on our collisions. So I'm going to hit Control D or Command D if you're on a Mac. I'm going to come into a simulation tab, simulation, and I'm going to set our substeps to 100 for now, and I'm going to set our collision passes to 10. And hopefully this looks a little bit better now. It's a little bit slower, but that's okay. Now the stack is almost very perfectly even, so I want to offset that with a random effector on the cloner. So with the cloner effector, I'm going to hit random effector. Now if you didn't have it selected, what you would do is just create your random effector, come into your cloner, go into your effectors, and then drag and drop it in there, which we already have it. So I'm going to go into my random effector. I only want 1 centimeter on the X, I want 0 on the Y, and I want 1 on the Z. Now you can see that they're offset a little bit. Cool. If I drop those, seems to operate a tiny bit faster. Don't know why, but let's go with it. Cool. Now this is actually how we want it to start off. So I'm just going to run that again, let that settle. I'm going to hit pause. I'm going to come into my cloth tag, dresser, and I'm going to hit set initial state. And now this is exactly how it will start off every single time. Next we want to do is turn off our gravity. So what I'm going to do is come in here again. I hit Control D, and I'm going to go into scene settings, and I'm going to turn off the universal gravity. Now we do want to control the gravity somewhat, but I'm going to bring in a gravity object a little later on for that. So let's turn off the scene gravity and just see what that looks like. And that already is cool in its own right. Now what we're going to do is bring in a turbulence object. Just to make this a little bit clearer, I'm going to, the forces tab, I'm just going to leave that there for now. So I'm going to add some turbulence. I'm going to set this to 100 centimeters strength, in the scale 10%, and I think I made this about 66%. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that's cool. That's roughly sort of where I started off with when I made mine. And then we're going to add a rotation. Now, it rotates by default on the horizontal plane. We want it on the vertical, so I'm just going to rotate this by -90 degrees. And set that to 100. Now, this rotation not only will cause the papers to sort of spin a little bit in its place, but it should pull it back into the center. If you notice, it was flying off to the side, and we don't want that. So this will help mitigate that. Cool, that's roughly what I had. I'm gonna make this 200 frames long. Then at whatever point you'd like, let's just say at frame 125, you want to turn that off. So I'm going to highlight both rotation and turbulence, and I'm going to come to their basic tab. At frame 125, I'm going to put a keyframe for enabled with it on. I'm going to go forward one frame, I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to keyframe that, so they should both turn off. However, we also want the gravity to come back, so I'm going to add a gravity physics object now as well. We want that to start at 0 because, as you remember, we want the papers to fly up from the beginning. And now here at 125, what I'm going to do is change the gravity's acceleration from 0 to default, which is 981 centimeters. And let's see how this looks. Bam, it's done. Okay, so before we start texturing and lighting, I'm just going to quickly cache the simulation. Great. Now we have playback of it. All right, so I'm just going to come into the asset browser, and I'm going to bring in some wood planks, and I'm going to bring in a paper texture. I'm going to put the paper on the cloner, and I'm going to put the wood planks on the collider plane. Let's bring in a spotlight. I'm just going to bring in a environment fog object, so we can visualize that light, and the light shafts around the paper are a lot easier. Instead, use our redshift render viewer. Cool. I'm going to add some color to our spotlight. Not much, just give a bit more character. I'm going to make it narrower still, and increase the fall off, so it's a softer light. Might bring a camera object in and give it some depth of field, and just make sure that the actual focus distance is centered on pieces of paper. Could use a tiny little bit more extra light, so I'm just going to bring in an area light and position that over to the opposite side. And I'm going to turn that way down. And I'm going to make it so that it's not contributing to the area fog. Alright, let's render it. Yeah, that's all there is to it. It's a fairly simple setup. You could probably add any texture to the paper you wanted, and play around with the parameters of the physics to get a different look if you'd like. You could use force fields to art direct the paper a little bit more, but that's how I achieved the effect in my original video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!